It was so warm there, and my dog Rex was flying. I saw lots and lots of lights, and they were singing. Grandma said it was too early for me. What is this? Fantasies? Fragments of dreams? But what if these are the real memories of children who have peered beyond the brink? Today, we will delve into the mysterious world of children's ideas about life after death. What do they see, finding themselves at the very threshold? How are their beliefs formed? In this video, you will find true stories of children who have experienced clinical death, commentary from psychologists and scientists, and practical advice for parents on how to talk to their children about this complex topic. Let's try to understand what lies behind their naive yet profound stories. The adult world is filled with skepticism. We seek logical explanations, cite scientific data, and often forget that there are experiences beyond our understanding. But children are unburdened by this burden. Their perceptions are pure. Their words are sincere. And when a child who has had a close call recounts what they saw, their story deserves to be heard. These are not fictions or fantasies. These are the true stories of children who came back. One of the most striking stories belongs to a 4-year-old boy named Colton Burpo. In 2003, the life of an ordinary Nebraska family was turned upside down. Little Colton suffered from severe abdominal pain, which doctors initially dismissed as the flu, but his condition worsened and a devastating diagnosis was made. A ruptured appendix. Peritonitis set in. The boy was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. His chances were slim. While doctors fought for his life in the operating room, his father, Pastor Todd Burpo, locked himself in his office, screaming at God in anger and despair, and his mother, Sonia, called friends and acquaintances, begging them to pray for her son. Against all odds, Colton survived. The family was overjoyed, but a few months after his recovery, the boy began to tell amazing stories. He spoke calmly, as if it were a matter of course. He said that during the operation, he had left his body. He saw from above how the surgeon, with instruments, worked on him, while his father prayed in a small room, and his mother spoke on the phone, also praying. The details he described were astonishingly precise. He couldn't know exactly where his parents were or what they were doing at that moment. But that was only the beginning. Colton claimed to have visited heaven. He sat on the lap of Jesus, who had beautiful eyes and markers as he called them, on his hands and feet. He explained that in heaven, no one wears glasses and no one ages. There he met his great-grandfather, Pop, who died 30 years before he was born. Colton had never seen a photograph of him, but when he was later shown a picture of his great-grandfather as a young man, he recognized him without hesitation. That's him. He's young in heaven. Another memory proved most touching and inexplicable. One day he approached his mother and asked, "Mom, I have 2 sisters. One died in your belly, right?" Sonia was shocked. Many years ago, before Colton was born, she had indeed suffered an early miscarriage. She and her husband didn't tell anyone about it, especially their young son. Colton, however, described in detail the girl he met in heaven. She said she didn't have a name because you guys didn't give her one. She's really looking forward to seeing you. This story became irrefutable proof for his parents that their son had truly experienced something extraordinary. He brought them news of the daughter they had mourned in silence, and gave them hope of a future reunion. Not all childhood experiences are so detailed and entwined with religious imagery. Sometimes they touch on more personal but no less profound connections. This is what happened with 7-year-old Pat. While fishing, he fell off a bridge into the lagoon, hitting his head hard on a rock at the bottom, and began to drown. When they pulled him out, he wasn't breathing, and his heart wasn't beating. Emergency doctors barely managed to revive him. Later, when Pat came to, he said he remembered finding himself in a dark, pitch-black tunnel. He wasn't afraid. On the contrary, he felt peace. And in that darkness, he was met by those he loved and missed deeply, his 2 deceased dogs. He said his beloved dog ran up and started licking his face, and his cat, just as she had done in life, rubbed against his leg. Their touch wasn't physical in the earthly sense. He didn't feel any weight or moisture, but rather a boundless love and joy at their meeting. His story featured no angels, bright lights, or conversations with higher powers. There were only his faithful friends, who came to comfort him in his darkest moment. It was their presence, he said, that sent him back to his body. For a young boy who had experienced trauma, this meeting symbolized that love never dies, and the bonds that bind us to our pets continue beyond death. 3-year-old Heidi had a similar experience, but with different imagery, when she drowned in her family's swimming pool. Her father found her lifeless body and began CPR while an ambulance was on the way. The girl was clinically dead. At the hospital, doctors managed to restart her heart. When she regained consciousness, her story astonished both her parents and the medical staff. Heidi described seeing her body from the side, lying by the pool, and her father trying to help her. Then, she said, she was met by Heidi, as she called him, a tall figure dressed in white. This man took her hand and led her to a beautiful place. She described vibrant flowers she had never seen on earth, and a multitude of children playing happily. She, too, wanted to stay there and play with them, but her new friend said she had to go back. He led her back to the tunnel, and the next moment she woke up in a hospital room. Heidi's story, like Colton and Pat's, carries a powerful charge of comfort. It speaks of how even at the moment of physical death, a child is not left alone, that they are met by someone kind and loving, and that the world they enter is a place of light, joy, and play. These stories are just a small part of the vast number of testimonies collected by researchers around the world. They're different, but they share something in common: the absence of fear, a feeling of peace and love, and a meeting with someone or something familiar and bright. For children who have experienced such experiences, death ceases to be a frightening end. It becomes a transition, beyond which a continuation awaits. Despite differences in age, cultural and religious upbringing, the stories of children who have had near-death experiences are strikingly similar. When we analyze dozens, even hundreds of such stories, collected by researchers around the world, clear recurring patterns begin to emerge. These are not simply chaotic visions of a dying brain, but structured, coherent journeys sharing key elements. Let's examine them in more detail. Perhaps the most famous and recognizable image is the tunnel. Children describe it in various ways, as a pipe, a well, a cave, or simply a dark space with a light visible at the end. It's important to note that for them, It's almost never frightening. On the contrary, movement through this tunnel is often described as fast and smooth, like sliding down a water slide. They seem drawn forward, toward this alluring light. It's not a frightening darkness, but rather a transition, a corridor from one state to another. The feeling of fear that might have been present during the trauma or illness completely disappears, replaced by curiosity and anticipation. And then they reach the end of the tunnel, where the light greets them. This light is the central figure of almost every story. Children unanimously describe it not as a blinding physical light that makes you close your eyes, but as a radiance imbued with boundless love, kindness, and acceptance. It is warm, alive, intelligent. Some children directly call it God, others an angel, or simply a being of light. This light knows everything about them, and in its presence they feel completely safe, as if they have returned home after a long absence. The light radiates a sense of forgiveness and understanding. It does not judge, but rather envelops them in its love. The third universal element is a feeling of absolute peace and serenity. In an instant, all the pain, suffering, fear, and anxiety that accompanied them before death disappear. A child who had just been suffocating or experiencing excruciating pain suddenly feels lightness, wholeness, and incredible bliss. Many describe leaving their physical body, seeing it from the outside, doctors fussing around, parents crying, but feeling no connection to this dramatic scene. Their new state is so wonderful that they have no desire to return to their sick, suffering body. It is a world without pain, a world of absolute peace. And they are not alone in this world. Children often talk about encounters with deceased relatives. Interestingly, these can be not only beloved grandparents they knew well in life, but also relatives who died long before they were born. A child who has never seen a photograph of their great-grandfather can accurately describe his appearance and clothing, which is later confirmed in family archives. These kindred spirits greet them with joy, hug them, tell them they love them, but often add that the time has not yet come, and they must return. Besides people, children often see their deceased pets, dogs, cats, hamsters, joyfully running to greet them. These encounters create a sense of familiarity, a homely atmosphere, confirming that they have entered not a strange place, but a familiar one. What is most striking is how much these childhood experiences resonate with the accounts of adults who have had similar experiences. The tunnel, the light, the sense of peace, the encounters with the departed. All these key markers are present in adult reports as well. However, there are subtle differences. Children's accounts are often more vivid, pure, and literal. They are devoid of the complex religious or philosophical interpretations with which the adult mind tries to explain the experience. A child simply says, "I saw a bright light, and it loved me." An adult might begin to discuss divine energy or cosmic consciousness. Children see heaven as a beautiful garden with animals and flowers where they can play. Their descriptions are straightforward and free of ambiguity. And it is precisely this unclouded purity of perception that makes their testimonies particularly valuable and compelling. When we hear children's touching and luminous stories of journeys beyond the familiar world, encounters with departed loved ones, and a sense of all-encompassing peace, it's easy to succumb to the mystical charm of these stories. They touch the deepest chords of our souls. But let's put emotions aside for a moment and put on the lens of a researcher. What does science say about such experiences? Is there a biological basis for these visions? It's important to understand the scientific approach does not seek to devalue or refute personal experience. It merely attempts to explain the complex processes that can occur in our brains at critical moments between life and death. One of the oldest and best studied theories is the oxygen starvation or hypoxia hypothesis. When the heart stops, oxygen delivery to the brain also ceases. This organ is the most active consumer of energy, and without oxygen, its cells begin to rapidly decline. But this process is not instantaneous. Different areas of the brain shut down at different rates. It is believed that the famous tunnel with a light at the end may be a direct consequence of hypoxia in the visual cortex. Peripheral vision is the first to suffer. The field of vision narrows, leaving only a central insula, the very light at the end of the tunnel. And the sensation of light itself may be caused by the chaotic pre-death activity of neurons in the visual system. The brain, attempting to interpret these abnormal signals, creates a familiar and powerful image. Another line of research involves neurochemistry. In response to severe stress, trauma, or pain, our brain releases a veritable cocktail of powerful substances into the bloodstream. First and foremost, these are endorphins, our internal opiates, comparable in potency to morphine. A massive release of endorphins can completely block pain and induce feelings of euphoria, bliss, and detachment from the present moment. This may explain why people experiencing clinical death due to severe injuries experience incredible peace and calm instead of agony. Their brain literally anesthetizes and calms itself. Some scientists go further and suggest the involvement of psychoactive substances in this process, such as dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which, according to one hypothesis, can be produced by the pineal gland in the brain and cause complex, vivid, and meaningful hallucinatory experiences, including encounters with various entities. Finally, the third key theory turns our attention to the electrical activity of specific areas of the brain. Research has shown that stimulation of the temporal lobes can evoke experiences strikingly similar to near-death experiences. A sense of leaving the body, replaying vivid memories of life, and a sense of an invisible presence. Perhaps this particular area of the brain becomes hyperactive at the moment of death. Moreover, recent experiments have documented a striking phenomenon. Immediately after cardiac arrest, the brain not only shuts down, but briefly displays a surge of highly organized, synchronized activity, even more intense than during waking consciousness. This may be the last salute of consciousness, the neurophysiological basis for a hyper-realistic and meaningful experience that is forever imprinted in the survivor's memory. Thus, science offers us a map of possible biological processes: oxygen deprivation, a chemical storm, and an electrical surge. These theories do not answer the question, what is there beyond the line? But they show how complex and mysterious our brain itself remains, capable, in a borderline state, of generating entire universes of meanings and images. Imagine a child who, at 2 or 3 years old, barely learning to speak, suddenly begins talking about another family, another home, another life. They're not just imagining things, they speak with astonishing accuracy, naming names, places, and details they could never have recognized in their current life. It sounds like a movie script, but for some families around the world it's reality. This phenomenon, known as past life memories in children, has been studied for decades by a small but persistent group of scientists. And their findings raise questions about the very nature of our consciousness. The central figure in these studies today is Dr. Jim Tucker, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia. He continued the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who began systematically documenting such cases in the mid-20th century. For more than half a century, their department has collected and analyzed over 2,500 cases from all corners of the planet. Their methodology is rigorous. They don't simply listen to children's stories, they try to verify them. Researchers meticulously interview the child and their family, documenting every detail, and then go on a quest, searching archival records, death certificates, news articles, and, most importantly, the family of the deceased person the child claims to have once been. What do these children report? Typically, memories emerge spontaneously between the ages of 2 and 6. A child might say, "My other mother cooked differently," or "At my old job I did it like this." Often these memories are related to violent or sudden death. Children can remember details of their deaths, plane crashes, car accidents, or even murders. One of the most famous cases studied by Dr. Tucker is that of a boy named James Leininger. From the age of 2, James was plagued by nightmares in which he screamed, "The plane is on fire. The little man can't get out." He described an American fighter plane from World War II with remarkable precision, naming his fellow serviceman Jack Larson and the aircraft carrier Natoma. His father, initially skeptical, began investigating and, to his astonishment, discovered that a pilot named James Houston had indeed died in combat over the Pacific. His plane had been shot down by the Japanese, and he had served on the carrier Natoma Bay alongside a man named Jack Larson. The details young James described were so precise that they could not be dismissed as mere coincidence or childish fantasy. Another striking case is that of Ryan Hammonds, who from the age of 4 claimed to have once been someone else. He begged his mother to take him home to Hollywood and talked about meeting old movie stars, working for an agency, and having 3 wives. He described his luxurious home with a swimming pool in detail and even remembered the street number. After extensive research in Hollywood archives, the family and researchers were able to identify the man whose life Ryan was describing. He turned out to be Marty Martin, a Hollywood agent who actually lived at the address listed, was married several times, and died in 1964. 55 different facts from Ryan's stories were verified, and the vast majority of them matched Martin's real-life story. Of course, the scientific community views such stories with great skepticism. Critics offer alternative explanations. It could be cryptomnesia, a phenomenon in which a person remembers information they once learned from a book, film, or conversation, but forgets its source, mistaking it for their own memory. Others point to the possibility that parents, consciously or not, guide their child to the correct answers. However, researchers like Tucker argue that in many cases these explanations don't hold up. The details children provide are often too specific and obscure to have been overheard accidentally. Despite the compelling nature of individual cases, the phenomenon of children's past life memories remains on the fringes of mainstream science. It raises too many uncomfortable questions about the nature of memory and personality. Is our consciousness merely a product of the brain, or can it exist independently? We cannot give a definitive answer, but the stories of these children, filled with genuine longing for a different family and inexplicable knowledge, force us to acknowledge that the world still contains mysteries we are only beginning to explore. The world a child is born into is already filled with answers to questions they haven't even had a chance to ask. And the most fundamental of these, what happens next, is no exception. A child's ideas about life after death are rarely their own invention. Rather, they are a mirror, reflecting the beliefs of their family, culture, and society. These beliefs, transmitted through fairy tales, lullabies, and quiet conversations, create a map of the unknown for the child, helping them comprehend what frightens even adults. Let's look at a world dominated by the Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam. Here, from an early age, children are presented with images of paradise or the kingdom of heaven. This is not just an abstract concept, but a very concrete, almost tangible place. It is described as a beautiful garden, where there is never pain or tears, where the gentle sun always shines. The deceased grandmother didn't simply disappear. She went to heaven to the angels, or went to the gardens of Jannat. This image is incredibly comforting for a child's psyche. It doesn't deny the fact of loss, but softens its bitterness, replacing the frightening emptiness of nothingness with the promise of light and eternal peace. Death ceases to be an absolute end, becoming a transition to a better place, where one day everyone will meet again. This narrative gives the child a sense of security and faith in a higher justice. A child growing up in a Buddhist or Hindu family sees a completely different worldview. Here the central idea is reincarnation, an endless cycle of rebirth. The soul doesn't travel to a final destination, but continues its journey, changing bodies like clothes. Death here isn't a door, but rather a transfer to another branch of existence. This is explained to children through simple and understandable analogies. A caterpillar dies to be reborn as a beautiful butterfly. A seed must disappear into the earth to give birth to a new tree. Actions in this life, or karma, determine who you will become in the next. This teaches the child responsibility and compassion for all living things, for any ant or bird may harbor a soul that was once human. The fear of death diminishes as it loses its fatality and becomes merely part of the eternal cycle of life. In many traditional cultures, from Africa to Latin America and Asia, there is no clear division between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The cult of ancestors flourishes. Children are taught that their great-grandparents are not gone forever. Their spirits remain close by, protecting the family, offering advice in dreams, and rejoicing in the successes of their descendants. They are an invisible but integral part of the family line. They are conversed with during rituals. Offerings are left for them, and their names are given to newborns. For the child, this creates a powerful sense of roots and continuity. Death does not sever family ties, but merely transfers them to another dimension. Departed loved ones become wise and all-knowing patrons, giving the child a sense of security and belonging to something greater than their own short life. But what about secular families, where strict religious dogma is absent? Here the focus shifts from the mystical to the human. Death is explained to a child through the prism of biology and memory. The human body is a complex mechanism that one day stops working. But the person themselves don't vanish without a trace. They live on in the memories of those who loved them. They live on in their children and grandchildren, in the tree they planted, the house they built, the stories they told. Grandpa is no longer with us, but we will always remember how he laughed, and taught you to ride a bike. This approach teaches a child to value life, legacy, and human connections. It helps them cope with grief through preserving fond memories, rather than through the belief in a reunion in the afterlife. Thus, every culture provides children with their own language for talking about death, whether it's the promise of a Garden of Eden, the eternal wheel of rebirth, the unseen presence of ancestors, or the cherished memory in the hearts of the living. All these stories serve the same purpose. They create a protective cocoon of meaning around the terrifying mystery of nothingness, allowing the child's soul to find support and solace in the face of the greatest enigma of human existence. Returning from beyond the grave is more than just a happy escape. For a child who has experienced such an experience, it is the beginning of a completely new, different life. The memory of this journey does not fade with time, like a normal dream, but rather becomes an internal compass that guides the entire journey. Perhaps the most fundamental change described by almost everyone is the complete disappearance of the fear of death. For them, death ceases to be a frightening end, an unknown or a punishment. It becomes a transition, a continuation, a return to a state of light and peace. This experience grants them astonishing inner freedom and wisdom beyond their years. Along with fear, interest in material things disappears. Values change radically. A child who yesterday dreamed of a new toy can today sit for hours observing nature, or ask questions about the meaning of life and the structure of the universe. A thirst for knowledge, spiritual quest, and a desire for love and compassion replace selfish desires. They begin to feel the pain of others more acutely, whether human or animal, and a deep inner need to help emerges. This experience essentially erases the boundaries between self and others, leaving a sense of universal unity. Remember Pet, the boy who encountered his deceased pets in a dark tunnel? That experience shaped his life. He grew up to become a veterinarian, one of the best in his field. But he doesn't just treat animals. He founded several shelters for homeless dogs and cats, dedicating himself to saving those abandoned by others. Pat says that encounter taught him the most important thing. Love never dies, and our bond with those we love is eternal. He doesn't fear loss, because he knows separation is only temporary. And Amber, the girl drawn to the warm blue-white light? She grew up to become a hospice nurse. Many wonder how such a young woman can work with dying people every day without emotional burnout. But for Amber, this isn't a job, it's a calling. She brings her patients the light and peace she once felt herself. She helps them pass on without fear, telling them that beyond the threshold, there's no pain or loneliness. Her own knowledge, gained not from books but from personal experience, becomes the final consolation for dozens of people. Some children report the emergence of unusual abilities after near-death experiences, heightened intuition, the ability to premonitions, or even the physical state of others. Science cannot yet explain these phenomena, often attributing them to the effects of trauma, but for the children themselves, it's as much a reality as the rest of the world. Thus, a near-death experience isn't just a story with a happy ending. It's a story of profound personal transformation. It's an event that transforms an ordinary child into a person with an incredibly profound outlook on life, a huge heart, and a clear understanding of their purpose: to bring to the world the light they once saw.